The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Welcome back to the Piercing Wizard podcast. We are going to talk a little bit about conference, because next week is the APP conference in Vegas, but we also wanted to talk about some industry stuff. Go ahead and introduce yourself first, because I feel like this episode is primarily your brainchild.
Oh, throw me under the fucking bus, why don't you?
So it's Lola's fault if you don't like this episode.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lola Slider. I am the piercer and owner of Forest Piercing in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm the co-host of the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'll be seeing some of you in about a week at the APP conference in Las Vegas. Along with Ryan, we'll be attending again, doing some instructing and doing some vending as well. So we have a few things to share with you about that to get you excited for conference. But this week, we're going to be talking about piercing economics a little bit, viable pricing models for your business, and keeping piercing accessible for working class clients. So we have a few interesting talking points for you on that.
I think we should kind of like interweave the two things. We can talk about some conference stuff when we pause for thoughts. Something that Lola and I like, we have our conversations at the end of a day, and sometimes we have we joke that sometimes we have podcasts that no one will ever hear because we're fancy and intellectual and we just talk about stuff all the time. And we both kind of feel like, I don't know if tipping point is too strong of a term, but we're kind of at this point in our industry where there's like a fork in the road of keeping prices affordable for the people who aren't into gold and gems, and they just want a piercing. Maybe they have a tighter budget, more of like a working class kind of person. And then the other flip side of it is the people where just the sky's the limit. They want gold, they want gems, they want curation, they want the kind of body piercing that's more frequently represented on social media. Whereas I feel like the non-gold, non-gems piercing style is more represented out in the real world. Like, some of us might lose sight of it because a lot of our clients might be skewed one way or the other. But there's that whole flip side of the coin out there. And sometimes an individual shop's business model might not really align in a certain way. Sometimes you might be kind of forgetting about the clients who are actually spending money in your studio because you're trying to search for like this elusive client that's maybe more of a thing on the internet. So what are some of your thoughts on it? It's a difficult conversation to get started because there's a lot that goes into it.
Right. And we do want to be clear as well, or I at least want to be clear. It's in no way an attack on like ultra high-end bougie shops that are doing their thing. That's not what it's intended to be at all. But the thing about, well, I think first of all, I'm in the UK. Things are a little bit different here economically than they are in the US. When I started my career, there were no fancy options for piercing, even in basic titanium. The quality was of a certain standard throughout the country. If you wanted anything other than a plain ball, it was a ball with a gem glued into it, and that was it. So throughout the course of my career, that has improved and expanded, and the options have increased. And with that, I've had a client base that I have brought along with me on that journey and educated in those products. Something that I've talked about before, and I talk about a little bit in the class that I teach on transitioning away from externally threaded jewelry, is that if 10 years ago I'd have come into or won a huge sum of money and spent that money on overhauling the business to high-end stock, it would have gone out of business because the market was so unprepared for it. There was no market understanding or level of education about those products. You would never see the return on the investment. You wouldn't make the sales because you can't just completely overhaul everything about your business, everything that it does and who it serves without losing a massive chunk of your core audience. So there has to be this kind of relationship where the two of you go on that journey together. I remember it taking a good 6 to 12 months to really do that transition the first time from external to internal and changing up quality at different points in my career as well. It's always been a long educational process where I've really put the time in with my customers, and that's how it's been sustainable. If I'd have just dove in with both feet 10 years ago, somehow magically, if I'd have had the ability to do that, even though it sounds like it would be easier, it would have been the wrong move. Like it would have been the wrong move for my business. And I think that that's something people might not understand when they're opening new businesses is you're trying to come up with something that's sustainable for the market. And I mean, there are a lot of different facets to it. I've never liked the word luxury in piercing. I've never leaned into the word luxury in piercing. That's a preference for me, again, for lots of reasons relating to connotations and class and that sort of thing. But the main reason, honestly, is that I want what I do in my studio, an APP member studio, working to a high standard. I want that to be seen as normal. I want that to be seen as ordinary. I don't want that to be seen as luxury because luxury is exclusionary by definition. It's sending a certain message. I want safe piercing to be the baseline. When people come in and they get a plain piercing from me with a classic piece of implant grade, internally threaded or threadless titanium from an APP verified vendor, I don't want that to be considered a luxury. I want that to be normal. So I have this weird thing in my head when it comes to branding for what I want for my business. And that is a very personal thing. And it's not in any way meant to be a critique of businesses using that branding. But I think that it raises an interesting point about who your business is serving and what the messaging is of your business, because something that we've talked about quite a lot in private is how fashion influences piercing and how certain markets are fickle in a way. For a couple of year periods, something will be really in and then it'll be really out and then it'll be really in. And are you going after the fashion market, which can turn on a moment's notice? What's your core? And for me, working class clients have always been my core. And I think they've always been the majority of the industry's core in the early noughties, in the 90s, and the 80s. I think working class people have always made up the majority of our client base. So it would just be nice to kind of think about how we could best service those demographics or that demographic, since it's the one that's been paying our bills a whole lot of the time.
Well, that's a great conversation we can get into, Lola. But before we do, I want to talk about how how I pay my bills, and that's through Patreon. And I've got
You
a
are
new
you are a hero of the working class.
I am a hero of the working class. Um, I have a new video available at patreon.com/RyanPBA, and it's one that I've had requests to make for a while, and it's bevel theory exercises. It's all of the different exercises that I've developed through doing the bevel theory seminar and webinars, teaching that over and over again for years now. I've developed a set of exercises that can be pretty helpful for people. Sometimes you might have seen pictures or posts or short videos of me piercing banana skins with people. So it's a couple different exercises that show how a needle cuts a hole, how you can reduce tissue trauma, how you can like apply bevel theory, and you can just do it over and over again in your hands, and you can really start to build up a lot of like confidence and experience with it. So that's available now on my Patreon. It's about 20 minutes long, shows a couple different exercises, and I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. So I'm proud of this one.
See, when you say exercises, though, I think that you've missed an opportunity to just Photoshop yourself in the 80s neon workout
Hmm.
clothes.
From the Let's Get Physical video.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Do exercises with Ryan.
So that's available right now. Go ahead and check it out. Patreon.com/RyanPBA. Like heading into conference season with our expo booth, I also want to tell people if they're not already used to it. I've been doing a conference exclusive shirt for my Patreon supporters the last few years. The first one we did was like a Defend Piercing shirt. Last year was the Modzilla design. And this year we have our Pump Up the Gems, which was your brainchild, because we were watching a lot of Kunk on Earth and Pump Up the Jam kept coming on. So Lola had the idea to do a Pump Up the Gems design. So that will be conference exclusive, meaning you have to be at conference to get one. I'm not going to be shipping these shirts. If you're not at the conference, unfortunately, I won't be able to get you one of the shirts this year because they're conference exclusive. But if you're in a different country, you'll have another opportunity to hopefully get one for either the BMXNet conference or the UK APP conference. So stay tuned for that. But I'm going to have a bunch of stuff available at the booth this year, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the episode. But something you just said in your last segment kind of resonates with me. Every bubble bursts, and I've been piercing long enough where I've seen several bubbles. I kind of started during the tail end of the modern primitives boom, and then into like the BME, more like extreme kind of stuff, a lot of surface piercings, the rise and debatable fall of surface anchors, the triple forward helix came and went, the Doth craze came and went, and then gold, like the rise of gold and itty bitty gold and everything should be gold and gold only studios and all these things. And I don't know that it's going to burst quite as dramatically as some of those other things. Like there were points where I was doing multiple Doth piercings, Daith piercings every day. I was doing sets of triple forward helix piercings, if not every day, then multiple times in a week. What if the gold trend starts to fade in favor of something else? Just like really, really nice tattoos have given way to what's that trend now called where they look bad on purpose?
I think that it's called ignorant style.
Ignorant style
I
tattooing, the
think.
ones where
I'm not
everything looks,
100% sure.
yeah, it looks hand poked or like you just did it yourself on the couch. What if body
Uh-huh.
piercing starts to revert back into more simplistic styles or something? So some of these business models that are really heavily built up around gold, 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 everything's gold. I really hope that you have some diversity in your skill set and in what you can bring for clients because economically, we're seeing a pretty significant downturn in the UK, in the US, financial downturns. And sometimes that means that people might still want piercings, but they might not want $500 piercings anymore. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing. Is it a downturn or certain things just going out of style? This is
Hmm.
another element to it. And I don't want to suggest that working class people don't buy and enjoy gold jewelry. Again, that's the
Yeah.
majority of my client base. But the way that they shop is a little bit different. It's not people coming in every couple of weeks and splurging on new pieces and having, collections are built up with me gradually over time. That's what I see most of the time in my business. People aren't coming in and doing big overhauls and making very, very elaborate purchases on a daily basis. I still cater to that market. I still have that jewelry. I still work with those clients. But I also make sure to constantly keep my titanium end piece collection varied, up to date, so that I have just as many options for clients who are shopping in that price bracket. So they're not made to feel like, here's a ball for you and all of this other stuff you can't afford. So I try and keep it varied. But it's like you say, when I opened up my business, it was very much on the business model of what do I need to do? How many clients do I need to see? Assuming they're all getting the least expensive jewelry option to pay all of my bills and to meet all of my overheads. Everything is based off of that kind of minimum spend, as kind of a safety net. And sure enough, a couple of years back, when there was that huge energy crisis in the UK, kind of towards the back end of the pandemic, there was a huge energy crisis. Everyone in the country, every person's bills went up by 3, 4, sometimes as much as 800%. So completely bananas. And the month that that happened, my sales were just a complete downward slope. And it wasn't because I wasn't seeing clients. I was seeing the same amount of clients. They were all just getting pierced with less expensive jewelry because their finances had been so restricted. So that's what I'm saying when I say that working class clients, working people have always been my core. And even when money's been really tight, they still come in, they still support my business, but their spending habits change. And I know that spending habits are different in different parts of the world and that sort of thing. But you have to pay attention to the circumstances that you're working in. And you were one of the first people I heard talk about that in your sales class that I saw, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something. You did a sales class where you talked about the average income for your area and the amount of people living in your area. And it seems like it's so simple, but I had never thought to even think about that or check that. Like people living in different areas earn different amounts of money. You're working with different demographics. So making sure that you're servicing that demographic, even if you're catering to other markets, I think it's pretty crucial to have a sustainable business model. Like it wouldn't be ideal for me if the gold sales dried up and I wasn't able to do as much of that work. But I also know that I could withstand a lot of that because it's something I've already experienced in the past. So having a business that's fashion proof, I guess, that's trend proof, I think is going to become more and more relevant in the next few years. I think a lot more businesses are opening up and they're going straight for this luxury market. And again, I don't mean to suggest luxury is a bad word. I don't mean to say that, but they're going straight for that market. And part of me has this reservation where I think, but that market can be so fleeting in terms of fashion and trends and where the money's being spent. And when you look back over the past 10 years, the decade before that, the decade before that, the decade before that, there has always been this core there that's not necessarily made up of the demographics that we're seeing now in the more high-end market. So I think that kind of neglecting that market and not continuing to cultivate it and treat it like it's very important, it feels like a bad move business wise. And again, I'm still learning how to run a business. I didn't have any training in that when I opened my first business, which was really evident in a lot of ways. But I just feel like that to me seems like a bad move. I don't know. You've been in business a lot longer than me, and because you're so much older than me.
Thank you.
Um, you've seen more of those trends come and go.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm not trying to say stop ordering gold, stop promoting gold, stop using gold. Like that's not what I'm trying to say at all. What I'm trying to say is if that's the only card in your deck, what happens if that card isn't effective anymore for your clientele? So my biggest category, like I don't really like to share sales info because I see that as like a potential liability. I don't want to try to promote any one brand over another because I use several. But like I sell gold in my studio, but that's not what keeps us in business. What keeps us in business are clients coming back,
Yep.
clients knowing that they can get what they want. And if what they want is a nice gold piece, we have an assortment. But clients also know that if they're a little bit tighter on a budget, they can come in and they can still get a quality piercing for around 75 or 80 bucks with a nice piece of titanium that's verified, that's sterilized properly, that's installed by people with training, et cetera, et cetera. And I do feel that some of these younger business models, some of these like new-ish studios or piercers that are kind of getting into it now, they see the promotion online, and the promotion is the fantasy. Like businesses are selling the fantasy. Like you can have this beautiful set of curated, et cetera, et cetera. We can do this for you. This is a possibility. And it's like, yeah, you want to inspire people the way you market, but I don't want piercers to think that that's all that's out there and that's all that clients want, because clients want a variety. Clients want to be able to get something that they feel happy with, and that can be the look of it, but that can also be the cost of it. If your whole business model is built around, we have to sell this gold, what happens if you're not selling that gold anymore?
Mm. The other thing that I wanted to say is that there's a piece of advice that I don't think is very good advice. And again, far be it from me to be giving out advice, like I'm doing so amazing. I should be giving out the advice. I don't think that that's true. But there's a piece of advice sometimes that you'll hear, which is, oh, you're worth it and they'll pay it. They'll pay it because you're worth it. And when I hear it, I think, well, maybe if they have it, but they have to have it. And if they don't have it, they can't pay it. There's absolutely a ceiling to what my clients can afford. And kind of juggling that with what's sustainable for me, what allows me to keep the business healthy and to keep investing back into the business with that money the business brings in, that is a balancing act. In terms of my costs, I think I charge a fair amount, but it's probably not as much as some piercers with less experience than me now even are charging. And there are times that I know in my head, my piercing fee should probably be higher than this for the level of experience that I have, for the level of skill that I have. But I'm fine with it as it is because I'm in this long term. And like you say, the majority of my clients become repeat clients and they're coming back to me for years and years. I'm not looking at the one sale. I'm looking at 5 sales, 10 sales. Like that's how I'm managing my business. Sure, I could make the fee a little bit higher, but in the short term, is it going to be worth it? When I could keep my prices stable and consistent for a little bit longer and gain more of that repeat custom. And again, I'm not trying to tell anyone else how to do business, but I think sometimes charging as much as clients can physically pay and pushing them right to that end point, I don't always think is the best move financially. Doesn't mean you have to sell yourself short or undervalue anything. I don't think I'm doing any of that. But something that's always been important to me, and I don't know if this will track to an American audience, is I've never felt like a whole piercing experience should cost more than a day's wage at minimum wage, because a lot of people in Glasgow work a minimum wage job and make minimum wage. And when you work a minimum wage job, which I remember from being working in McDonald's when I was 16, is that you often think about things in terms of how many days it costs you. So like when you work hourly, when you work daily, you look at the price of something and you go, that's less than a day. I can afford that. And then as soon as it ticks over to more than a day, you're like, oh, that's more than a day. Like you think about things in terms of your time because it's valued so literally. So like it's always been really important to me to not cross that line, to have a basic, simple service of a safe piercing cost more than a day's minimum wage. And I've always been underneath that. And I don't know, maybe it's arbitrary, like people set their own boundaries for what they're comfortable with. But that was something that was always really important to me because I kept coming back to this thing where I was like, why do I want to run a business that I wouldn't have been welcome in or I wouldn't have been able to shop in when I was a teenager getting pierced? When I was like 16, 17, 18 years old, like what am I
Yeah.
doing in a business that wouldn't like support me as a customer? You might not look at my business and think it's the most affordable place in town because it certainly isn't. But staying relevant and accessible to an average working class person has always been really important to me.
Uh, Post pandemic or whatever we're calling this, when I'm primarily appointment only with a little dusting of walk-ins here and there, I need to be able to hit a certain dollar per transaction to keep my business alive. So it's like if my business tomorrow went to we're just using titanium and nothing but titanium, that wouldn't be a sustainable business model either. So I think that like a good business model for businesses that have been around for a while is going to be that something in the middle. You're going to get some customers that want the least expensive option, and you're going to get some that happen to like the most expensive option too, but a lot of people are going to fall in the middle. And I don't know if people are going so far beyond the middle. They're walking a line that might not be long-term sustainable for them. So I just want people to think about what you need. Like, what do you need to earn per client? And if you start earning less than that, well, then what do you do? Does that mean that you have to change your turnaround time so that you're seeing more clients in a day? Or does that mean that you're trying to push clients towards something more expensive than their comfort zone might steer them to? So it's a conversation that I think a lot of people are going to need to continue having over the next few years.
So this is the thing. Think about the amount of, I'm not going to mention brand names here, but think about the amount of boutique style stores that have opened up on the high street doing variations of ear cartilage piercing and earlobe piercing with gold jewelry, with needle piercing. So they're basically doing a kind of like piercing studio light type thing. They're not doing anything from the neck down. They're not doing oral piercings or septums. They're kind of just doing like cartilage and nostril, using the gold jewelry. And they're servicing a specific market, and it's very, very fashion. And the reason they've all opened up in the last couple of years is because there's money there right now. That's why they weren't open before, and they may close down 5 years from now. We don't know. But that's why they're there. It's like they can smell there's money in that market and they want to capitalize on it. So try and think, if the demographic that you're serving is that limited to that specific thing, I would be concerned, like you say, about, what happens if there's suddenly a shift in the fashion and in the climate with piercing, because like you want to have your business supporting all different kinds of demographics, like people from all walks of life, people from all different varying price budgets. You kind of want everybody to feel welcome in your space. I mean, but again, like that's me. That's how I'm running my business. I totally appreciate other people might want to run theirs in a completely different way. And if it works, then like fantastic. I think that that's a really good thing. But this is just something that we kind of wanted to mention because I think it's the side of business that doesn't get talked about. So for people that are opening up studios, I think that they think, oh, I can just do this and sell gold, and there's enough of a market there for me to do that. But they maybe haven't had the scope of thinking, well, there's a market right now, and not thinking about the potential that that might not be there forever. So I think that it's worth saying out loud and just exploring as an idea to think about who has supported kind of commercial body piercing in the Western world for the past 50 years. Like, I know it's people from all walks of life, but I don't necessarily think that focusing a huge amount of your business is branding and marketing and energy to one specific demographic that could be fleeting is maybe the best idea for future proofing. It does seem like a short-term strategy to me to just wring as much money out of that demographic as possible while the going is good. Like I would much rather do, maybe one piercing a day with a nice piece of gold, a few with jeweled titanium, a few with plain titanium barbells, and just have that mixture and that variety. So I always feel like if one thing kind of goes in and out of style, it's okay because kind of doing a lot of things in the studio. But I mean, I've been running Forest for like 5 years this year, so I'm a business baby compared to you've been working precision for over 2 decades now. So I know that my opinion might not be the most valuable or the most valid based on that experience level. But, I've been piercing for 14 years and I've been on that journey with my clients. I know who my clients are. I know what my demographic is. So really, I just want to encourage people to learn what their demographic is, learn who their clients are, learn what their community is like. And I think that's a really good way to help future-proof your business.
Yeah, I also want to encourage people to be as versatile and prepared as possible. Those, like you said, those fashion piercing adjacent businesses are popping up everywhere in malls and in salons. I have them here in my city. You have them in your city. They're everywhere, and like Lola said, they're coming for that money that's there right now. when one trend comes and goes, you're still there and you can still offer whatever maybe the next trend will be. That's how I try to look at it. Did that pretty much encapsulate what you were thinking?
Yeah, it's one of those subjects that I could talk about with you all day and probably have done. And
We
it's
have.
hard sometimes to articulate those finer points. And like I said, I do touch on it a little bit in the class that I teach on transitioning away from external threading, which I'm doing at BMXnet this year. I have just recently learned, so hopefully I'm allowed to say that. I haven't actually done it at a conference before. It's been by private webinar only, so I'm really excited about it. But yeah, like one of the things that that class focuses on is that there's a lot more that goes into the psychology of sales and product education other than just buy a better thing and people will buy that thing. There are lots of different ways to market better quality jewelry. And there are also some not so good ways to do it as well. So it is a subject that interests me. But I think at the core, I just want people to ask themselves, when I was 18 years old, could I have shopped in this business? Would I have been able to afford it? Would I have been welcome here? Would there have been something for me? And I think that that's the question that piercers should be asking themselves. I worked in a tattoo shop for a long time. I was around tattoo artists for a long time. And sometimes there is a not so great mentality, shockingly, amongst tattooers where, well, not always and not all of them, but sometimes they try and put their prices up because they've heard someone else has put theirs up. So it's kind of like, oh, this guy down the street, he's charging more than me an hour now, so I should put my prices up to match him. And you would kind of think like, well, you can if you want to, like if you need it and if the costs have gone up and if, cost of living and stuff, but like you don't have to just because he is, because that starts to sound like a monopoly. Like you should look at your business, what it's worth, what your experience level is, what your overheads truly are, what's needed, and work out something that works best with your demographic. For me, it's actually holding back on some prices and focusing more on repeat business with customers. So it's like it is different for different shops, and obviously always make sure that your jewelry is priced appropriately because that benefits everybody in the industry, including the people making the jewelry as well. So that's really important. But when it comes to things like pricing, look very closely at your situation before asking the industry for input necessarily, because they know nothing about your situation, most likely. And be careful with advice like just charge whatever you think you're worth because they'll pay it. Because I think that that advice isn't necessarily the wisest in all situations. But yeah, just keep piercing an option. Safe piercing should absolutely be an option for the average person working a minimum wage job. Like they have every need and every right to be able to come into my business and get pierced. So like keep a strong presence and representation there for that demographic, I think.
I have my method, obviously I have a whole class about it. But that's one of the reasons why it's called ethical sales strategy is I'm not trying to push everybody towards the absolute highest ticket thing. It's that I want to just kind of show them what I have and then pick up on their cues as to what they like the look of, and then we kind of steer towards something. If you price yourself out of your own market, that's a bad thing.
I think a lot of it as well is branding and marketing because I don't know what other people's prices are. I tend not to look too deeply at what other people are doing, but I know that I'm one of the most expensive studios in the city that I work in. I don't know if it's the most expensive, but it's one of the most expensive ones in the city that I'm working in because I'm working with all verified equipment and materials, and there's a higher price tag on that, and for good reason. But I don't think that people necessarily look at my business as exclusionary because it's not branded that way. And I think it's not just the price tag, it's when people look at your business, you want them to feel like they can come in and have a browse and ask questions and that there might be something in there that's going to work for them. And that's something that is also carefully considered in terms of how the business is represented. I don't want people to look at my business and assume they can't afford it, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
there are
Okay.
definitely shops that are set up to, whether they have high prices or low prices, the branding is set up to suggest maybe you can't afford this. And that's not something that I want for my branding. I want people to feel like they can come in, have a chat, ask some questions, get some prices. And quite a lot of the time, I'll get into conversations with clients and they'll be like, in a way, like a little bit surprised that there's lots of things they can actually afford. Like maybe they weren't expecting that from an APP studio. And then when they actually get to chat and they're like, I can totally shop here. This is great. And it's just really nice to be able to offer that. So like, again, I'm not saying that like my business model is superior. I have all of the same struggles and difficulties that other small businesses have. But if I could give any advice, it would be like really learn to cultivate and grow that local community market, because it could be the thing that saves your ass when things get tight at work.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is probably a good place to wind it down before we start rambling, but I wanted to talk about some of our designs that we'll have for merch at conference. Do you want to talk about any of that stuff, or is that like a wet blanket on a work talk?
There is stuff at conference that we will have. The stuff will be there at conference with us. There will be a table where we will put the stuff. You can come and look at the stuff. You can have it if you give.
Okay, you should not be allowed to work in marketing. All right. So I've got a bunch of new pins this year.
Basically what I said. That's exactly what I said.
Uh-huh. I did a pin of Lola's Modzilla design, and we also did a reprint of her Dothra pin. So we have the kaiju pins. Couple new versions of a Defend piercing pin. I've got pink and purple, but also glow in the dark, which is neat. And then I brought back my classic Statum Cult pins, the ones with the teal handle, but then also like totally new designs. We like I haven't talked about these yet, but we have the Crush Your Needles design, which I think is probably my favorite for this year. That's going to be a shirt, and it's going to be some stickers. We're going to have sticker packs with a lot of die cut stickers. And then what was your idea for the now?
Oh, now that's what I call piercing,
Yeah.
like the music CD
Yeah.
album compilation.
Now
It's
that's what I call piercing.
yeah. It makes sense visually. And I'm also bringing Pokemon cards to put in the sticker packs, because who
Because you're
doesn't love
nerd.
Pokemon cards?
I love Pokemon cards. Well, stop by our booth, say hi to us. We're nice people most of the time.
Mhm.
Um, I am looking forward to just being with you in Las Vegas. I'm not looking forward to it being over 100 degrees every day.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it. I'm never going to complain about how hot it is in the desert because I'm from Glasgow.
yeah, you live in a swamp. Well,
Yep.
I just want to remind everybody, especially if it's your first time being in Las Vegas, you should have a bottle of water in your hand or in your bag at all times, because like the air just sucks the moisture out of your body. You can get dehydrated so fast there. So whatever you would normally drink for water in a day, if especially if you're not from like a really hot and humid area, drink like 10 times that much water. Just constantly be drinking water if you want to make it through the week.
I drink hot coffee when I'm in Vegas.
Yeah, it's
Hot
because you're a
coffee
goblin.
or hot tea.
Yeah.
Ryan's bringing me a travel kettle so
Yeah.
I can have tea in the hotel room.
All right. Well, I've been Ryan, and you have been
Lola.
Lola, and we'll see you at the APP conference next week.
Bye.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.